Good evening, everyone. It's 6:30 on August 10th, 2023, and this is the monthly meeting of Fitchburg's Transportation and Transit Commission, calling the meeting to order. And we do have a new member for the first time tonight, so I'd like to welcome Dave Wilborn as our representative from the Board of Public Works. So glad you're with us.
Thank you.
Let us do a quick round of introductions for Dave, for anyone who he might not know, and take a second if you want to tell anything about yourself or why you like transportation or anything.
Well, without transportation, you can't get anywhere.
Yeah.
But when I was reading through it, like, you got some nice ideas, but how are we gonna get them all in?
We're not. We're gonna pick a few and prioritize.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bill, and introduce yourself. We'll go around this way.
Yeah, Dave and I go way back to like May or something.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I'm also on the Board of Public Works. So, fresh new alder, just elected, first time ever in April, and so there you go. Steve?
We go way back too.
Yeah.
So Dave knows me from my years on the council and Board of Public Works.
Rich Tate, I've been around the block a few times. I was put on originally back when we were suing charter. Mayor Vivian asked me to sit on the charter.
Broadband.
Yeah, and from there I'm now on planning. I actually was on Public Works briefly until an opening came on Planning Commission. I'm the Planning Commission representative to here. I'm also on Board Review.
Okay.
I've lived in Fitchburg. My kids are all born here. I think I came here in the 70s.
Elizabeth, welcome. We don't go back, and I don't go back a long time on committees. I've been here for about a year.
Tim Volker, Director of Public Works, City Engineer.
And a short timer for this committee.
Yes, yeah.
I'm Ross Kaler. I'm the Transportation Engineer in the Public Works Department. Tim and I started at the city right at the same time, so I'm still fairly new to the city, but I lived here for a few years before coming to work here, so happy to be here.
Thank you. Bill Horns. I was on the council for a few years back. And I've been on this commission now for 5 or 6 years. Can't remember exactly. But I did want to note that we do have a quorum, so I think it's maybe important to get that on in the minutes that we do have a quorum. I'm the fifth one who's spoken so far out of it. We only need 4.
Yep. And our staff contact and commission secretary will record the attendance for the meeting. And we are in transition between Tim, who was filling in this commission when we didn't have a transportation engineer, and Ross has taken over. And will this be your last meeting, Tim, I assume?
Yes, we'll talk about it.
They'll talk. We'll find out next month
Yeah.
whether that's happening. Anyway, welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
I see no members of the public, so there will be no public appearances for non-agenda items. I would entertain a motion to approve the rest of the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
I just had a quick question. There've been some emails about this issue of what constitutes a development project and how do we get those to come to us? And I don't see anything here on this.
Yeah, we don't have it on tonight's agenda. I brought that along. There will be some discussion of that on these 2 proposals that we have before us, development proposals. And I will propose to put it on as a future agenda item. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Thank you.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, we are good. The next item is approval of minutes. Entertain a motion to approve or not.
Approval?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Dave. For discussion, I will move 4 amendments. There's a typo in number 3. We had a motion to amend the agenda to break out item 6A as 3 separate items, not and 3 separate items. I would like the minutes to note that 6C was deferred until this meeting, as was 6D. So they're on our agenda again tonight. And just a minor thing under number 9, PARC is an acronym, P-A-R-C, and it should be in all caps. And that's all I had. Are there any other, I move those amendments.
I second those amendments, is that?
Yep. Is there any discussion on that? On those amendments? Go ahead.
No, I just had another.
You're going on. If there's no discussion in favor of those amendments, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Say no.
I'm gonna abstain, because I wasn't here.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll not take a roll call, so that won't matter. So here are those amendments. Are there any other suggestions for changes or?
Well, I don't know, I was just, I didn't quite understand under E, 6E, it says motion to have assigned commission members to review the transportation element of the comprehensive plan to discuss at next meeting by, and I can't remember what, it says I made that motion, I can't remember what my motion was, and I don't know quite what this means.
Well, we were asked, for my memory and according to the minutes, to review that, and Dina sent out the link so everybody could get those pages. And that was going to be part of the discussion of policy work items, which is 6C. So,
I guess, I mean, it's just a minor comment, so.
any other discussion of the minutes at all? Yeah, I personally prefer more detailed minutes of what was discussed, even if no action was taken. I know the city attorney doesn't favor that, and there's more work for the staff secretary. But are there any other comments? All right. Then on the main motion to approve the minutes as amended, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. All right, those are done. Yes.
I had a comment, but I didn't know where to actually put it, maybe that.
You should have done it under discussion, but I'll recognize you now
Well, I
for
just-
that comment.
I'm on a board and 2 commissions, and usually when you go to what I do when I prep is I click on the agenda link, and then I see a supporting documents, and then I can focus on one thing at a time. And I noticed in 6AB and another one did not have any links on the supporting documents. And we did have reference back to last month's packet, but I would like to see information readily available. Like I said, a lot of times I don't spend the
Can
day,
be
but
repeated.
I'm just going to look at one item at a time. I don't know. I just want to make it.
Can you carry that back to Dina?
For 6A and 6B?
The question
Or this
was
one.
really to ensure that the collateral material is linked to the current agenda and that there is collateral material for every item, unless there is absolutely no collateral
Yeah,
material.
for 6A and 6B, there is no collateral material. That's the transit study, we were just gonna bring an update.
That's okay.
So that's the reason nothing was attached. And then the response to the Beltline study, I believe the material was provided last time. I mean, we could have provided it again. So we'll just double check next time.
Hopefully, we will not be deferring as many things as we start to figure out how much work we can get done in one session.
So Rich, are you concerned that the material wasn't available in the packet or that it wasn't available in separate, broken out?
In separate, broken out, because
Okay.
like I was in a motel room in Lincoln, and I wanted just to spend half an hour or whatever looking at the prepping, and without taking the entire document with
You're
you.
familiar with how that works on the, like, if you go to the agendas link and it's got the meeting and then boom, boom,
And
boom.
it opens up the other
So-
list of
And it's
links.
probably minor, like Tim said, it was,
And it's not in the packet also.
Right, just,
Yeah.
going forward, instead of just having a 500-page agenda, Rich wants to see, these 30 pages, these 90 pages, et cetera. As a
Linked.
unit.
well, yeah, so we can have combined, because I'll
Right.
often, like for plan commission, I'll download the packet. Look at that over the weekend, but I don't want to make a big deal out of it, I'm just a comment.
For future reference, a perfectly appropriate time to bring that up would be during the discussion of the approval of the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, next item is actually referred to us by the council. It is a resolution approving a relocation order. Relocation order is when we buy land from people without them wanting to sell it. So we'll start out with a motion to approve or to recommend approval or recommend denial.
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, so on the discussion, so I'm just gonna wave things around, knowing that you all received this. But this is very late in the process and a very detailed map of some tiny little land parcels that have to be bought to make this road fit into the transportation plat. I think this is a really good example of something that we should not be looking at. That obviously, the road has to be completed, the site triangles have to be purchased, the width has to be purchased to fit the sidewalks and the bike lanes and things like that. And so that's what's happening at this stage of the process, is approving a relocation order. And to close the loop for the council, I do think that we ought to approve this, but with respect to South Saline Road reconstruction from an urban to rural to an urban cross-section, this was really it's very far along, and back when there was before you guys were here, there was a neighborhood committee, steering committee, that worked on this. There were people who didn't want the road widened, and people who wanted parking, and people who didn't, and the owner of the McCoy house wanted the path to stay behind the house, and things like that. And that input was taken and put to the council and the public, and there was, the meetings were recorded, and it probably still is on the city website. That is where I believe this committee should be weighing in, where there are policy implications, and reviewing the project to compare it to our policies, or at least our aspirations for policies in the comprehensive plan. So, any other discussion about that?
I kind of felt like this was more of a public works sort of a thing at this stage, rather than, because, just kind of echoing what you said, and everything that we've got on our agenda tonight is how do we shape the future of transportation, rather than how do we approve.
What's the angle of this slope?
Right, yeah.
Indeed.
Plus, I don't have my 8K monitor, so trying to view those documents is crazy.
Rich?
Coming from an architectural engineering background, I would rather have too much information than not enough.
Right.
I think what you're getting at is that this could have been presented earlier with all this, but I think KL Engineering does a great job. Kim used to head this group. And I guess I don't want to create work for somebody when it's already done. So it's our job to sort through it, but I understand what you're saying. At the timing, or maybe just a synopsis or something like that.
Sure. So we're just getting our feet wet as terms of, there was some question about why we hadn't done projects in the past, if the founding ordinance of this commission clearly says that we should. And I was the first member of this commission and on it for the first 10 years. And I can tell you that the council did not have any appetite to send projects to any more commissions than necessary. They felt that this was slowing development and being obstructionist and expensive for applicants because they had to hire engineers or lawyers or whoever their consultants were to come to all these meetings. I believe that, personally, that that is money well spent to work out all different aspects of projects before people start buying land or pouring concrete or other things that are hard to reverse. But that's the reason why there haven't been transportation development projects coming to transportation. On this particular one, I did have one question that I think you guys can probably answer. This is about land being acquired for the stretch from East Sherrill to West Clayton. And there's no mention made of 2830 and 2832 South Saline, the two houses where the sidewalk is missing, just north of Sherrill on the east side. Is there going to be a sidewalk there, and is it going to be in the existing right-of-way, or are they buying some of that property?
I believe there's gonna be a sidewalk there and no property is necessary to be acquired, so.
So the suggestion I made back during that time was that we make an offer. Those people did not want the sidewalk. I said, make this offer. In my unofficial capacity as a private citizen, I said, make this offer to them, why don't you? If you agree to give up property or an easement so that the sidewalk can be straight, then the city, which already plows the snow all along that stretch and on the first block of 9 Bark. So a city plow runs down the sidewalk even though they're adjacent property owners, because the adjacent property owners on 9 Bark do not have access to the street and the backs of their homes face the street. So the city plows that even though by state statute the landowners are also liable. And then they plow the entire stretch of South Saline because it's a park. And so to plow 2 extra lots instead of cut across the terrace onto the street when you get to those private lots and continue to Rodeo Drive, that would be an easy thing for the city to do forever and ever. So give us the land and we will plow the snow, or don't give us the land and you're responsible for the snow. So I don't know who's responsible for snow, but they didn't give us the land or the easement or sell it to us. So there will be a dodge in the sidewalk there to keep it in the existing right-of-way.
So that's what you said is a comment really on the plan as they exist. It's not a suggestion or a motion of any kind.
No.
I just wanted for clarity, and I agreed with everything you said about receiving this referral and so on. But is your point that we should have seen the substance of this earlier?
No, my point is that for future similar projects, we should see them earlier. I don't want to say, relitigate this or anything.
But that's what I mean, so
Yep.
for things of this kind, we should have been engaged in this decision about, which is basically a condemnation decision earlier in the process.
Really, not so much the condemnation, but the actual design of the street.
Okay.
So that's what I think this committee should be concerned with, is safety, throughput, serving all users, those kinds of things. And I think we got a good result, so long as that sidewalk is there, as you guys say that it is. I would have liked to have seen the multi-use path go in front of the McCoy house, and a committee like this could have provided that input. Anyway, any other discussion on this? So the motion was to recommend approval. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. All right then, that is taken care of. The next thing was to hear from staff the status of the Transportation and Transit Commission recommendations on this transit study in resolution R20522. 22 means it was last year. And from our last agenda, it says the TTC has recommended that the study focus on 3 specific intra-city transit issues. 1, providing shuttle service to the Fitchburg Civic Campus. 2, providing a public transportation connection between Hatchery Hill and the Fitchburg Civic Campus. So I guess number 1 means from various places around the city.
From any place.
Any place, right? And then number 3 is providing a parking area to support park and ride service from Fitchburg to the UW in downtown Madison. So I think that we were asking for staff to tell us where those recommendations are. What can you tell us about that?
So our goal for this is to get an RFP, request for proposal, put together for a study, studying those 3 things, with a deadline of end of September to get that RFP out.
Okay. What's the time frame envisioned for the study itself?
We haven't discussed that in particular, but I would imagine that it could be done over the winter and be ready in the spring.
I think that would be ideal, so they'll be ready for budget time.
Yep, that is a good point.
Were you looking for more on that, Bill, or?
Well, eventually. I mean, I think one of the problems with this is that what we've given staff is a pretty sketchy statement of what we're after. And so exactly what will be in this RFP is a big open question. And I guess I'd hope we would be involved in that. It would discuss the RFP and what would be in it. So I just wanted to track the process, find out where things are, and help move it along to the extent we can. I don't know if at some point it may be appropriate to have a chairman go to the council and remind them of the importance of this and so on.
Well, they're developing it. And this would be obviously the commission with, by ordinance, jurisdiction over that study. So you were planning to have the RFP go out by when again?
End of September.
End of September. So what if, would the draft be available for our next meeting, or an early draft or bullet points or something like that?
That'd be early September.
First week of September.
You could have a draft ready.
Yeah, we can shoot for at
Yeah.
least just the, kind of the description.
Yep,
of what we're
the
looking
scope.
for, the scope of work, to bring, basically under this agenda item, just, bring forward the draft of the scope, have you guys look at it, and then get comments, and then after the meeting, we can kind of finalize it and advertise by the end of the month.
Will the council approve the RFP?
The council does not need to approve the RFP.
I think that would be a terrific use of this commission.
Steve, just for my notes, the 3 points you said, the shuttle to Fitchburg campus, public transportation.
I've lost it here.
Public transit between Hatchery Hill and
Yeah.
Fitchburg Civic Campus.
Number 1 was provide the shuttle service from around the city presumably, but it doesn't say that, to the Civic to here. Number 2, providing a public transit connection between Hatchery Hill and the Civic campus. And 3, providing park and ride in Fitchburg to get to UW and downtown Madison.
Okay, good, thanks.
I think I mentioned this last time too, but Park and Ride near PE Fish Hatchery was on that Beltline PEL, so I don't know how much
Yes.
collaboration.
I was gonna bring that up next, that there are these 2 things that may take care of some of these study issues, based on, other organizations wanting them as well as the city. Like the Beltline PEL for the park and rides at PD and Fish Hatch, and then close to the movie theater on McKee was another location from that study.
Interesting.
Park and ride.
I would, this isn't a big pot of money, $25,000 for a study. So I would certainly, wouldn't hurt my feelings if that element of it was minimized. Because of these considerations, because of the thought is being given to it.
And the other thing on that same note I wanted to bring up is Tim and I have a meeting with Madison Metro next week. They have put forward that they're gonna have some capacity open up for extra bus route extensions. With the BRT, they're building more garage space, so they're gonna free up existing garage space.
It means they'll be able to get more buses, which
Exactly, so.
is a constraining factor at the moment.
Yep, so that would open up a good possibility of the transit extension from Hatchery Hill to Civic Campus.
There is a volunteer group of architects and planners called the Madison Design Professionals. And they did an elaborate study of BRT, the proposed and now adopted east-west and north-south BRT routes. And at that time, rail was still a hope. And the BRT, and they have proposed station locations and proposed development and so on, would continue from Hatchery Hill to the Civic Campus and then to the commuter rail station at Nine Bark and the rail line. Some elements of that could be very valuable to us as, what is that, the D line that comes down here to Hatchery Hill? B or D? B is in Bravo. We really want that to come down here. And so that will open up the possibility for BRT coming down here because the BRT line, the north-south BRT line, will replace that bus line eventually.
So the current draft map of the BRT ends at McKee, behind the Walgreens.
Okay,
So further than Hatchery Hill, but
Okay.
not quite all the way to Civic Campus.
all right, but we wanted to make one more stop. Very important, very valuable. And, that will certainly help the WIBA potential future mixed-use development there. That land is for sale. And so we should be supporting that, I think. That's my input for your meeting. Anything else on that item, status of TTC recommendations? Or are we on PEL study? No, we're
No.
So
not there yet.
Ross, you mentioned a possible park and ride near the movie theater. Is that gonna be inside or outside the boundary of TID? I think this one is 17.
I believe it would be inside the boundary, cause it's parcel 38 and 37, is that the actual movie theater?
There's a lot of parking
Yes.
space there that should be.
That is the movie theater.
There's an existing giant parking lot, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that's, very extremely draft stage, kind of the thought was, there's
They
already a
looked
big
at
parking
just
lot
traffic
there.
flows, they did not look at existing development because there's no opportunity to put a park and ride at McKee and Fish Hatchery, unless you're paving the E-way, right?
I guess I had assumed it would be in the parking lot of the hotel or something.
Yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be the exact location, it would be, in that area serving that intersection
Okay.
kind of
Maybe
thought.
jumping the gun to our next agenda item, but I do think we should encourage them to look down at Lacey, because I do think it's important. And I think the bus line will go to the park and ride eventually, so I do think when we submit comments to the Beltline, to the DOT, I think we should encourage them to look at a park and ride location here instead of McKee. But I might have jumped us to the next agenda.
Anyway, my only point was make sure you coordinate with the boundaries of that TID, whether it needs to be in or needs to be out or it doesn't matter.
Having a park and ride in a TID seems like a bad idea. Because you're looking for tax base, not parking lot. All right, anything else on 6A? Otherwise, we'll move to 6B. And my question for staff is there still anything that we can do to influence the Beltline PEL study? Because this has been deferred and the original call for comments has expired as far as I know.
We can provide comments. Ross reached out to him, so we could submit something by email to him, a couple bullet items, if that's what you guys choose to do, or because it's passed. There will be other opportunities also.
Yeah,
This has been going for a long time. I don't know how close to the end they are.
well,
Plus the
They're
fact
close
it's
to
for the 2040s.
yeah, there's the study part of it, and then there's all of the individual projects that might come out of it as well.
My understanding is they're choosing a package, and then they're gonna do public comments, and then they have to do the EIS, which will have public comments. So I believe there will be
Okay.
quite a few, a couple more public comments.
So who has looked at it and has some comments that they would like to share that we can maybe agree to and have staff forward? I have some, but I want to hog the
Yeah, I
Forum.
think Elizabeth sent us some
Elizabeth?
comments and we're kind of on the same page there. I think, widening highways has never worked if you're trying to reduce congestion, right? It works for a year or two and then you're right back where you started. Just in general, I'm not sure why this particular project would be immune to induced demand.
It wouldn't.
And I don't know what the price tag on something like this is, but I would imagine that it could fund many years' worth of public transportation. You could cut down the amount of traffic on the Beltline, to 5% of what it is if everybody rides a bus instead of drives a car, and then you could remove a lane or two in each direction. So, that's just my general feelings. I'm happy to have more connectivity for non-motor vehicle traffic to get across the Beltline. I think that's pretty valuable, especially for Southdale area. It's unfortunate that probably the only way to do that is with more bridges, so it takes a bit of effort to climb, especially if you're you're walking, you're biking, you're in a wheelchair, whatever, and then we're asking you to climb 40 feet and then come down 40 feet on the other side, or whatever it is.
However, if one side is already up, then it's not so bad. For example, our fish hatchery bridge is already up on one side, so you have to climb up to that level no matter what. The pedestrian bike bridge between Rimrock and Park Street is similar. It's already high on one side, so you've got to go up a hill, but you'd have to go up that hill anyway. That's why I never liked the McKee Road Bridge at the Badger, because there was no hill.
Right.
And so now we've got a hill to go up and down.
Yeah. I've seen any number of people, my wife works at the UW, so her route takes her over the Cannonball Trail on that bridge over the Beltline. And, when possible, I'll ride out there and ride home with her. And, we've seen any number of people get off their bikes and walk up that bridge just because it's,
It's huge.
too much effort.
And my wife hates going in that direction on that. She only goes the other direction over that bridge on her loops around Lake Wingra.
On a related note, I think we have beautiful bridges for bikes, like the one over PD. I think that's just, it's so nice to see that somebody gives a damn about what something looks like, and
As well as the one crossing Fish Hatchery Road.
yeah, so.
Well, that is it, well, okay,
Well,
I
that's
wasn't
what
sure which one you meant,
I'm
because there's,
talking about the one up here on Fish Hatchery, yeah.
okay, because there's the one that actually does go over McKee, or two that go over McKee.
And they
Closer
have the
to
same,
River Road.
This is,
and they have the same design.
Yeah,
My Facebook comment on the Madison Bikes list was, our Fish Hatchery Road, Capital City Trail Bridge continues to set the aesthetic for bike ped bridges throughout Dane County, which they've just put a new one over University Bay Drive,
Mhm.
parallel to University Avenue, and again, it has our green arch design. The two exceptions are the two Beltline weight bridges, but the McKee Road Bridge that Madison built is also arched green out at the Ice Age Trail and so on. So there is in the PEL study, I do not remember this feature. They want to increase the capacity for motor vehicles. Okay, well, I disagree with that. I focused on the disruptive effects of the Beltline on the local road network and the mitigating features that they included for that. Potential new crossing between Gammon and Whitney Way, the reconnection of Perry Street, which I've been arguing for many years, the reconnection of Badger Road over the Beltline, and a similar idea is the connection of Rolfsmeyer Drive to the Southdale neighborhood at Ski Lane over Route 14. I've argued that people are aware of the 3/4 Beltline that includes the Stoughton Road that goes around Madison and its dividing and constricting effect on the city. But Fitchburg has a similar problem. We have a north Beltline, including the Verona Road and US 14, and they provide barriers to the local motor traffic as well as bikes and peds and so on. So we should continue to fight, in my opinion, for more connections through those barriers and fight capacity improvements or increases, because all they do is enable more driving through induced demand. Other comments that we want staff to share on?
I agree, and like I mentioned before, moving that parking line right if possible down to Lacey, so it hits this area, I think would be good.
I think park and ride should be at the edge of the urban service area, or if the urban service area is planned to expand at the edge of future expansion, because we want transit to go out to the edge of the urban service area, and we want to stop all that driving through the urban service area. So I argued that a good place for park and ride was the intersection of County B and MM, where people are just coming into the city. I think that the park and ride at East Verona Avenue and the Verona Road, the existing one, is perfectly placed by that criterion. Another place would be south of our urban service area along Fish Hatchery Road. But I would not want the park and ride in the urban service area. It should be just beyond, because urban service areas for people and water and sewer and curb and gutter, not expanses of parking, in my opinion. Other thoughts? Do you have something that you think you can draft up as bullet points to share with the DOT from our discussion?
I think so.
Does the commission want to see it before we send it in?
I think so.
Let's not require any action on our part, let's just be able to review it.
Review it.
Right,
Yeah.
say, oh, you forgot my idea, or I don't think I can sign on to that part of it, or something like that. We will be able, I would suggest that if you draft something and send it to all members with a reply to back to yourself, then you can get our comments, and if we kick a hornet's nest in some way, then you would bring it to our next meeting, otherwise send it in. Does that sound like a reasonable plan to members?
Or can you guys send us your Elizabeth, we already have yours. I don't know, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Bill and Steve, do you guys wanna just send us yours?
Well, what
We'll
I have to
combine
do is
them?
look at the tape of the meeting.
You said you had them written down.
No, you had it written down, you're the secretary. No,
Dina is the secretary.
for this meeting.
Yes,
Oh.
Dina is, yeah.
Okay,
She'll rewatch the video.
okay,
is
I
what
see.
she does.
okay.
I'm looking at the project page though, and it does say project comments, and it still says send project comments via email to project staff. So either the web page is out of date or they're still open and
Okay.
receptive.
Terrific. All right, so that means we got an action item.
We can compile everything and then send out one.
That's what I was
document.
hoping
Yeah.
for. Okay, can you compile it from our comments today, or do you want us to send it to you again?
I'll go ahead and send it.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
could send us it, it would be easier. If not, we can go back to the video and watch it.
Dina can go back.
Yeah, Dina can go back.
Oh, we're done.
Well, Dina will do the minutes, we'll do the responses. We won't put that on her.
Okay,
But it would be a review step
Right.
that way.
Yeah,
And
So,
send them to Ross, CCU, or
okay, now I'm doing it
that's
again.
fine.
Yeah, you're doing it again. And then I think if we,
PEO comments to Ross.
and CC Tim.
and then I think even if we open a hornet's nest on one issue, but the rest we're all in agreement on, it might make sense to send those on and to say we might follow up with more, just because I do think they're moving forward.
Indeed. Okay.
What is the end point of the PEL study? I mean, there will be a study report, something filed. Is it gonna lead to actions? Is it a?
It's supposed to guide future transportation development in the Beltline corridor through 2040, or maybe now they say 2050.
But it's a plan. I mean,
It's like our comprehensive plan for the Beltline.
And I believe, that was before you got here, Tim, that I believe we sent in our comments to the city on that, back when they requested it for the the PEL on the Beltline. Did we not send that through? You weren't here, but.
Yeah, Andrew had us go through, because I think he's on the TAC, and I assume one of
Okay.
you are now, and he had us go through the survey, and then I think he, sent in
So
comments,
the
but yeah.
TTC has already provided comments?
I don't
To-
think so, but do
We filled out Public Works.
Public Works sent in comments.
Right.
Public Works,
Okay.
okay.
Well, no, we went through the survey they asked the TAC members to fill out, and then Andrew filled it out, I think, as the TAC member, using our input.
Okay, so he's the city representative on the TAC, but they did not hear from the Transportation Commission.
No, we gave Andrew, at the time, our input, and he told the TAC
But it
what,
was from the Transportation Commission.
right.
Okay,
But, so I don't know, I assume one of you are now replacing him on the TAC, I don't know how that works.
Yes, both Ross and I
Okay.
sat on a couple meetings back in May, was it? I think.
Yeah,
When they kind of went over the study with the presentation, then Ross also attended a public meeting a couple
the
of
one
weeks
at the
after
Boys and
that.
Girls Club.
Yep.
Did, I was out of town for that. Did, can staff recover what was submitted on our predecessor's behalf?
We could take a look at
Yeah,
our
can I-
files.
ask them if they can send it back to us if we can't find it.
Okay, well, if you could find it either way, could we ask you to send it to commission members?
Elizabeth, do you think that's gonna show up in, any document, in from like a agenda packet or anything?
I would think so, but I don't know. I mean, I know the survey they asked us were in there. I'd
Do
be
you know
happy to go look for it.
Do you know the approximate date?
No, but I haven't been on here that long, so I'm happy to look for it and figure it out. I think it was February of last year.
Should we move on while you look for that?
Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to talk about? So you're gonna try to get that to us, we're gonna get our comments to you two, and we'll go from there.
Sure.
All right,
I'm assuming they'll get it to us though before, one day before our next meeting, right?
The survey? Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
We'll look forward.
okay, C, comprehensive plan, transportation element review, and possible policy work items. So the 20 things that we listed in the last agenda are still here, and we also, at our last meeting, asked folks to take a look at this transportation subchapter of the comp plan. And my hope was that we could make some consensus judgment or multi-voting or something on an area or areas that we feel a policy would help improve the transportation system, or the city's processes with dealing with the transportation system. And so far, nobody has said that's a stupid idea. So we have some good time here to discuss this. And after discussing or clarifying any of the items in the chapter or on the list, or any that anybody wants to bring up, then I suggest, and I'm open to other procedures, that we multi-vote, maybe put down our top 3 or top 5 each, and compile those and use that to propose what we'd like to work on in terms of policy, in addition to any emergencies or new development proposals that come before us. Bill?
Just a comment, I did pull out the transportation chapter. I just personally, maybe it's me, have a very small amount of patience for plan documents. I find them often, and this one in particular, loaded with not very helpful, not specific, platitude kind of talk. And so I gave up. I was gonna look through all those things and try to, tie, point, this policy suggestion from the plan to this thing, and I said, I'm not gonna do that. My question to the group is, how seriously should we take the plan? I guess it's a several question. How seriously should we take it in that sense of really actually looking for, should we be strongly guided by the plan? Or kind of just shrug it off? Should we also be asking, what of these issues really have some kind of, have been raised by people? I mean, how many of these are really important to somebody, and where they're really important to? Should that be a criterion? Not just our view, but what we've heard from the outside. And related to the first question is it time, or at some point is it time to really review the darn plan? I mean, is that what we're doing? In fact, trying to better state, provide a better plan, a more coherent one. So those are my thoughts.
Could anybody like to take a crack at Bill's questions?
I'll say that it is filled with a lot of, how did you describe it, platitude or something? But I like what they say for the most part. I mean, and I think they're purposely somewhat vague just because they're meant to be guiding principles, So, there's stuff in there about having a grid pattern in all new developments. We'll take a look at Highfield Reserve. That's not a grid, you know? So even something as simple as, when you have a new development, build the streets in a grid pattern, you know, if you make it, I don't know, it just seems like that's pretty straightforward. And there's also, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there about multimodal, and in fact, we are following the policy by building a bunch of neighborhoods along that rail line. You know, that's in there. So I guess you can argue whether you agree with those specific policy points, but I feel like by and large, they're pretty valid. And I don't know,
So I was too harsh.
well,
You're getting really close.
I mean, change my mind, but
And is your question which ones we should prioritize moving forward or digging into them?
Well, should it be our guide? I mean, one might say, as we go into this, when they say, well, we have a plan, it's got a whole list of policy suggestions. Shouldn't we be picking from those? That was, I mean, there was a whole public comments, exercise, meetings and discussion, the council looked at this. That's our plan. Shouldn't we be picking from that list instead of this list? I guess is another way of asking my question.
there's an awful lot of overlap, though. I think
Yeah.
if you look at our list of whatever we had 20-ish things on here, you can find something in the comprehensive plan that lines up pretty well.
Yeah, like truck routes.
Right.
It's like finding, you know, whatever you believe you can find it in the Bible someplace, right?
It's the art of cherry picking, really, yes.
Well, in answer to Bill's questions, I think that we as individuals, but trying to represent the best interests of the city as a whole, we're going to look at that list of mostly really great things. I agree. Vague, non-operational, but great ideas, and say, you know, the most important one is that one, and it's not an ordinance, and we don't do it. Let's push that one forward. So, for example, getting something in the land division or development ordinances, or getting something in the budget, or something like that. That's what makes these things from vague platitudes to something that's actually happening on the ground. And so some of these are very closely related to these. Some of these encompass more than one of them. Some of these together constitute other ones. It's not organized in the same way. I would be, after reviewing that, I would be very happy to pick from there. You know, if you have an idea for something and it implements one of these goals, policies, or objectives, then you can say, that's what I want to do according to this plan. So I don't think that the comprehensive plan and the transportation subchapter restricts us in any way from any of these other 20 ideas, but.
I think the biggest problem with the comprehensive plan is that people don't want to read it, right? So they don't know what's in there.
And it's not a force of law.
Right. Well, but even still, if people read it and they assume and make the assumption that this is what should be the guiding principles, they would probably come up with different designs. They're just unaware that this is out there, you know, in its entirety. They're aware of specific things, but not necessarily a big picture, just because it's, you know, it's kind of a big document.
Well, I believe there's a lot of good ideas in there, and I think we should go back and look at it, and come back and pick what we think would be something to start with.
Well, I was hoping something similar. I pictured this being a fabulous discussion for this group today, because all these are good. But then if we're gonna be prioritizing them, what are our criteria for prioritizing them? Are we gonna do a gap analysis where we see what we can accomplish the most with the least, or which has the biggest gaps that we wanna do? So I would like to, our discussion today, I would like to come back to this next month and the following month and the next month and make it maybe an agenda item, but let's determine what our criteria are for prioritizing these things. things and what we want to accomplish.
Prioritizing this list.
No,
These lists.
yeah, what our criteria are for prioritizing this list, if that's what we want to do, if we want to prioritize this. If we just want to say do all of it, we're done.
No, we don't have the resources to do all of it. We don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the staff,
I don't
we don't
understand.
have the budget. And I think Bill is quite properly saying, do we want to look at this list or do we want to look at this list? And I think that's a reasonable question.
Right.
And I don't think that necessarily we have to come up with, I mean, you could say, let's have criteria, we'll assign a certain percentage to each criterion, we'll score each idea for each criterion, and then we'll add up the scores and the one with the highest. I mean, that's way more process than we need.
That's overkill.
So I say, what are my top 3 favorites? What are yours? What are yours? If they overlap, then we can maybe come to an agreement on which, that was my idea for multi-voting.
What we want to do next month.
I wanted to do that this month. But certainly we can start the discussion. And looking at, go ahead, Elizabeth.
I was just gonna add, I think we shouldn't wait. I like choosing and just, I think doing something is better than analyzing the best thing to do. But I did notice, I took the city's sustainability survey they have out, and a lot of these are on the survey, so it might be good next time we choose what to work on next to look at kind of what the residents said they wanted to prioritize.
I don't know where this fits into where you are, Steve, right now, but one thing I think we should do, however we pick from this list, is we should expect to tie it to something in the plan. In other words,
I agree 100%.
we pick 3, 6, and 11 out of this, we should be able to tie those right back to something explicit in the plan. And just out of respect for all the work that went into that, and I know I might not like the style of it or something, but there's a lot of thought went into that plan.
Yeah, Bill and I were on the council back when that plan was devised, so.
And the other thing, just a thought, and you were reflecting on process, and I couldn't quite track who was in favor of some complicated process like you were describing for picking things. Things will get done because somebody has the energy to do it. And the motivation. And I think that, don't forget that. Somebody in this room has got to care enough and have the energy to do something about one of these things if we're going to do anything about it. So whatever the score comes out, if you did a scoring process and it got a low score, but 3 people were really intent about it, we should do that. So I would have that be the driver more than some scoring system.
Well, I think that the kinds of things that we can do as a city commission are make a case to the council, get budget, and then get staff or consultants on board to do it. Now, there's a certain amount of volunteerism that can be helpful, but I think that needs to be channeled into advocacy, because on the scale of a transportation system, you know, we can't have a bake sale to do these things. We're gonna, some of this stuff involves millions of dollars, some of it involves hundreds of thousands of dollars a year ongoing. We have to be, our goal, I believe, is to present things that we think are super important and a path forward to the council, and convince the council and the public that what it is that we're proposing is important to everybody, and that's how we can make Fitchburg a better place. I think of my time on the Resource Conservation Commission, and that was, you know, they did a lot of stuff. They cleaned out ditches, they had recycling events and things like that. And the public works staff did a lot of work, but those people were out there with the safety vest doing the work too. But I don't think that we're gonna be building any roads or even paths or sidewalks or parking places. We have to we have to do this by influencing city policy and budget. So one of the things that I was going to observe, there are one-to-one things like there is a policy about establishing a truck route system. There is a policy, I don't think I put it on here, of using official mapping, but it's an idea I had later, and that's in there, in here. One of the things that is among my favorites is Vision Zero, but that includes on this list number 4, 5, 12, 13, 14, and 19. It's number 18. And Vision Zero, of course, is safety, and safety, these objectives and policies are replete with safety. So that's something that I voted my number 1. I would be eager to hear other people's ideas on the things that seem most important to you, and tie them to this if you can.
Well, and it's important to point out that number 5 is comprehensive plan, transportation goals, objectives, and policies, so.
Indeed. That's
Yeah.
kind of redundant with what we were just thinking about
Right.
here in terms of a process.
But, one thing that didn't occur to me as I was submitting this, but I've since, I've learned a few things, I hope. I think, when a new neighbor is coming in, if we can make the developers aware of the city's transportation priorities, they will lay out the streets a little differently. They will, put in there's information in the comprehensive plan about everybody being within a 10-minute walk of transit, efficient and direct bike and pedestrian facilities or connections in all directions, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, currently, all the developments that are going in are this, kind of American standard suburb with cul-de-sacs and roads that don't connect with each other. And Ross, you can tell us maybe, what's the point of that? I think it's probably to avoid rat runners, right? Racing through the neighborhood, which is an admirable goal, but it does lead to situations where next door neighbors have to walk 3 miles if they want to visit each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very much a pros and cons discussion.
Right, and so I feel like what's in the comprehensive plan is kind of in conflict with standard practice, and something like that I would have put on this list, so maybe I can bury that under number 5 and make that one of my 3 choices.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, when we get to this Hartung development, and I hope we break this off in time to discuss that a little bit, it's a good example of what you're talking about, Bill. Other comments on
I'd
a
say,
priority that you like?
I'd say we should wait on intercity public transit and park and rides if we're gonna have a study. It seems like that will guide what we would do. And then to Bill's point about wanting energy to do something, I do know minimum parking requirements came up at one of the last city council meetings. And if this is about getting the city council to adopt something, it seems like maybe Bill, you know better, but there might be some interest in that.
Yeah, Alder Allen has expressed interest in overhauling that, and I think the most recent update was in 2010, so it's probably overdue for an update regardless.
I assume there are minimum parking requirements for things, and this reflects a desire to
Abolish them.
Abolish them, I guess, right? It doesn't say that, but
It doesn't say that.
It goes back to what Steve said earlier, within the urban service area, you want something other than car storage, right? You want something that's gonna feed the tax base and be,
No, I understand that there's arguments about that, but it's just, I guess my comment was, these are, maybe I should know it all, there could be a little more fleshing out of what each of these mean. There's a point of view behind it.
Indeed.
That is not really stated here.
Yeah, well, when I put 2 pages on average on each of these things, I tried to advocate for an idea. with respect to minimum parking requirements, we should abolish minimum parking requirements. We have abolished minimum parking requirements in the smart code zone, but not in our other zoning districts. Deanna, our planning director, came back, and I sent her copies of the parking requirements that I found on the website. She came back and said, well, we don't really have minimum parking requirements. What we do is we talk to people when they bring projects forward and tell them how much parking they should have. And that's what I want to avoid. Whether we have them in ordinance or in policy, what we should do, step one is have abolish minimum parking requirements. A more stringent step to get better tax base and more transit and so on is to provide maximum parking requirements. That's probably a bridge too far, at least until we cross the first bridge. But she is arguing that we don't have minimum parking requirements, and I think certainly in practice we do. And she says, well, for multifamily, we ask for 1.5 spaces per unit. So, like, let the developer decide. And there are two policies that are tough to legislate, but that can really affect us. And one of them is multifamily residential parking debundling, where people have to rent their spaces separately. And the other is employer parking cash out. And both of those basically eliminate an undesirable subsidy for driving alone everywhere. And here, for example, at the City Hall, you could give every employee a parking pass, require parking passes. But if you didn't want your parking pass, you could have $1,800 a year instead. And so I pulled that out of the air, but that's the approximate cost of a surface parking place. And so you could move across the street and get an $1,800 raise because you could walk to work. So there are policies that we can do to improve the urban form and cut down average trips per day and increase our tax base per acre. And those are all things that I want to do. Other thoughts? Besides Bill's request for more flesh on these, is there any particular one you want to hear more about? Okay. Do people feel like they want to vote, or do you want to take some other direction? Rich, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
No, that's all right. No, I'm open to anything. I was just gonna put my 2 cents in.
Do it.
I walk our dog every night. Fitchburg is a Shel Silverstein novel where the sidewalk ends.
We heard this last time, I think.
And I literally have to walk in the street with my dog with trucks parked there. So I'm actually walking in the traffic lanes to get from my house to Madison where we walk on sidewalks. That, though, with the Vision Zero, with walk-friendly community and the schools, I think that's something I would like to see focused, but that's because I have a personal interest in it. Mainly, I want to stay alive.
Rich lives in one of the neighborhoods that's by ordinance, we can't put, or by council resolution, we can't put sidewalks in. I live in another one. Rich lives in Jamestown, I live in Burnwood. People in my neighborhood walk south to Oak Meadow so they can walk their dogs on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
And I think it's terrible. I have a couple of citizens that have contacted me in my role in Fitchburg and saying, can we get some walk advocacy going? I want sidewalks on Osmondson, or I think that Schumann is terrible, or they've already been contacting you guys too. And so that's why I put in walk-friendly community. Walk audits is something that the bicycle committee has been doing. So it's important for our seniors that they be able to walk safely. So
I was also gonna bring up that the bicycle committee is looking at various portions of the bike ped plan, and Chair Hamilton has said, you know, we've been kind of light on the ped portion of the bike ped plan. We should be advocating more for pedestrian facilities as well.
I didn't know there was 3 letters at the end of that.
Yeah.
I have to throw out this comment, Steve knows this very well. I lost my seat on the council for
I lost
advocating
my
for sidewalks.
my mayor reelection because of
I
sidewalks.
lost my seat
Oh.
because of sidewalks, because
You should
and
have.
I wasn't even advocating
Should have called us.
masses, I was just advocating 2 blocks on Richardson, you know, where it comes down to Lacey, should be sidewalks, and, you know, that was the end of the story.
People
for me.
went
So,
crazy.
people, I mean, it is really, people really come out on it, and the second thing I wanted to say was, you can build sidewalks in Rich's neighborhood under policy. It just has to come from those people. In other words, those residents have to ask.
They have to have a referendum.
No, I don't think, unless something happened since I paid any attention, but I think all it said was, as a resolution, whatever the force of a resolution is, it said that we won't build sidewalks where they don't exist unless people ask for it for reasons of safety, so.
I thought there was language about a resolution.
And things have changed. I mean, some of these homes now, they're running businesses like gutter crews or whatever, and there could be 4 trucks in the street, you know, and a school bus in the driveway. So, whereas 20 years ago, it was just purely residential and everybody parked in their garages and driveways, you know.
And the final thing, then I'll quit venting about sidewalks. I completely understand the point of view of a lot of people who don't have a sidewalk, they live on a very quiet street, they've never had a sidewalk, they don't want one now, they've landscaping right down to the curb. And I just understand that they don't want a sidewalk, they don't want their yard torn up, so I get
Snow
it.
removal responsibility.
Yeah, I get it, and that's not gonna go away.
I get it too, I understand that, because in my walks, I see some very nice yards and artwork and things in the yards that wouldn't be possible with a cut through them. One more thing that if I may add is that I've always thought Fitchburg has been bike forward ever since we first were developed. We've one of the best communities in Dane County or in the state of Wisconsin for the way we treat bikes. It's our deal with the bike transportation, with the bike paths, with all we do. I would like to see, this is a frustration though, is signage at the RRFBs, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Because when Kim Lobel first explained it to me, you stop, when there's an opening, you hit the button, that way cars don't get rear-ended. Now you're driving, they hit it and proceed. And, you know, and if we could, something like that, and we could address that within the bicycle-friendly portion, but I still think we are miles ahead of everybody else when it comes to bikes.
I'm just gonna put in a placeholder that I don't exactly agree with what you just said about RRFBs. And if that's what Kim said, I don't agree
Well,
with her.
there's the rear-end collisions that were happening at bike
Right,
crossings.
Yep, and so I won't go into that right now. What I propose to do right now, if the body is willing, is just go around and give everybody a minute or 30 seconds and what should we do next? So I would start with Bob and go this way. I'm
Well,
sorry,
I
Rich.
just spoke,
Rich.
so I'm good with it.
You're good, okay.
Bob's his uncle.
Oh, I guess if I had to pick my favorite of these, probably walk-friendly community or parking minimums, but I'm really excited to move anything on this list forward.
I know, Steve, that you know more about transportation than anybody in the city of Fitchburg, and these are well-conceived ideas, even though they're kind of sketchily laid out in this particular list that you have backup information, so I don't doubt that. Probably will all go along with, for the most part, with any of these is a question of which to pursue first. And I don't have a strong opinion, but I do remind myself that we're just us, we don't have, as you pointed out, we don't have resources, we don't have,
Right.
we can't command anything from anybody, we just.
If we get the council to pass a law that does a good thing, you know, that's something that
We can.
we can do that.
Definitely do that. So anyway, I'm sorry.
Board of Transportation and Transit.
Well, I've been out here since 1974, and back then, when my kids wanted to have a bike on the road, you had to get a license from the police department to pedal down the road. Whatever happened to that? You know, that's just one of the things, and it was a gravel road at that time out here. And I've been, like I say, I've been right up the hill since 1974, so a lot of things come and go. But what I really like to see though is we gotta get city transportation for the elderly and even the youth. And I'd like to see a park and ride area, I really would. I think it's definitely something we should go after if we can.
Okay.
Personally.
Just because of the bang for the buck, as you know, was mentioned previously, Vision Zero, I think, can encompass half a dozen of these or more. So I will say that is one of my top picks, and then reiterate what I said earlier, the portions of the comprehensive plan that talk about how new development should be laid out. I think that, you know, those things are gonna be there forever, and I would at the very least like more discussion before we go with, you know, what has become the standard suburban layout.
All right, that wasn't exactly, some of you addressed partially what I was asking, which is what should we do next in terms of this list, not which topics we should tackle, but both are reasonable things. Let me ask a binary question. Do you think it would be better to go after something that is smaller and more compact that we can get our hands around, that we might get a quick win? Or are you more motivated to tackle a big problem that has lots of parts and will take a long time, that will really make a huge difference? Anybody?
I don't think I'll live long enough for that one.
Small
So one
changes
vote for
faster.
a quick hitter.
Yeah, I mean, the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? So, I mean, the small wins are probably gonna be more manageable, easier to get. That doesn't mean we shouldn't also quietly advocate continuously for the big things.
I think you can use small wins to build up to a big win by making the case along the way, how it all fits together.
Just a thought, since we work for the Common Council, would it be a good idea to present this list with our comments brief comments about each to the council and say, you know, we're looking for a little direction on how we can help you do your business and try to get something back from the council? I don't know if that's.
What do you say, Council Rep?
Well, I mean, just speaking in completely general terms, the council refers things to commissions and committees because that's where the grunt work is done, that's where the experts are, and you know, committees and commissions make referrals to the council, not the other direction. So I guess if I'm hearing what you're saying, you're kind of asking, you're saying, should we ask the council for guidance on what we should work on rather than, yeah. And I think, I mean, it sounds backwards, but, you know, again, change my mind.
Yeah, I mean, couched in some terms that give some rationale for where this list came from or why they're important. So we're not just saying, here's a list we have, which ones do you like, but here's our point of view about some of these things. How should we proceed?
Sounds like a interesting committee of the whole agenda item.
Yeah.
Of which there is no short supply.
Well, I heard that they were short of ideas, but maybe that's wrong now. I think that, personally, not speaking for all of you, but I think that while that's an interesting idea. I think that really they're swamped with things coming in from every which way, and that we should pick something and try to push it up. I would like to take a second and explain how Vision Zero works, and then make a proposal. So if you do Vision Zero, to speak generically, what you do is you first of all have a Vision Zero resolution, and then you have a Vision Zero implementation plan, and then you go out and spend money implementing that plan. And that's where you start to have curb bump outs and reduce speed limits or whatever you've decided will help safety. The advantage of tackling something like that is that there are some tiny quick hitters in it. So we talked, I think, last time a little bit about slip lanes, channelized right turn lanes, and how dangerous they are to bicyclists and pedestrians. And getting rid of those and no right turn on red are safety ideas. And there are counter arguments like, what do you do about truck traffic and so on, big trucks. But Vision Zero could be something that we could maybe get the council to buy into, and then we would have to work on an implementation plan and talk about what that means here. But it would give us lots of little pieces that we could advance as fast as resources permit, including quick hitters and big items and so on. So Vision Zero is the principle that no one should die or be seriously injured in traffic violence. And so Madison and Milwaukee have both passed Vision Zero resolutions and developed plans and are implementing their plans. And I think a great example that maybe you've all seen is when you go up Monroe Street, Nakoma Road by Thoreau School, they reduced the speed limit from 30 to 25. But we all know that you can't just reduce the speed limit and expect people to go slower. You have to change the design of the road. And they have these beautiful opposing bump outs that narrow the traffic lane down so that motorists are induced to go slower. And parking is protected by the bump outs and so on. Now, snowplow drivers hate them, but you know, we want to make, what's the most important thing? Safety or cost? And so most people, if you ask them, will say safety. So that's one proposal. But
So you're thinking, if we adopted that, our first step would be to suggest that council pass a resolution and then to sort of oversee the creation of a plan, or to go through their list and pick some things out that we'd want to choose?
well, the implementation plan is how you pick out those things.
Okay.
Okay? So for example, in our bicycle-friendly community application, we got dinged for not having any speed limit reductions. Speed limit reductions are an important part of Vision Zero, traffic calming to enforce speed limit, to make streets self-enforcing. And I'll give you a great local example. Across the street between Oasis Cafe and the Atomic Koi, what do you think the speed limit of that street is?
It better not be more than 25.
It's 30.
Yikes.
And the sign is right in front of the Atomic Koi. As you turn the corner, you get a confirmation sign when you turn it. What is the speed limit on this street? 30 miles an hour.
You sure that's not kilometers per hour?
That would be 18, and that would be great, because 20 is enough.
For
So,
a street like that.
Clearly, there are places where we can go around, and if you do, like, if we all came up with 10 improvements that we wanted to see and make a list and say, let's do it. And we go to Public Works and say, let's reduce that speed limit on the block up to Sparklestone Crescent to 30 miles, from 30 to 25. There's parking, there's people walking across that street all the time. That would be an easy, great thing to do. And it would be part of our Vision Zero implementation plan, is to look around the city and see, Another example we just implemented was to move the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit sign. Instead of starting at Seminole Highway, it starts up where the Badger crosses Seminole Highway. Sorry, at Lacey, it moves from Lacey Road south to where the Badger Trail crosses Seminole Highway. That was a smart thing that should have been done years and years ago. It got done as part of the thinking about the Lacey Road project and the new roundabout. All right, well, we need to move on. What do you want to do? Do you want to?
I support moving forward with Vision Zero.
I agree.
That's a.
I'm,
We'll take that as a motion.
I would support safety, and so that I.
Take that as a second. Okay, let's discuss that idea.
Just clarification, the first step is to get the council to adopt Vision Zero.
We need to draft.
There are some steps to that, yes. The first step is to educate the council on what it means and what they would have to do next. You can't get them to say Vision Zero, to pass a Vision Zero, without knowing that there's got to be an implementation plan next, and then it's going to be budget implications when you start moving concrete and making signs and signals.
Okay, I just have a suggestion. My suggestion is that you, Steve, knowledgeable about Vision Zero, get on the council agenda just for information items at a meeting. Describe Vision Zero briefly. Inform them that this commission is considering urging them or adopting a resolution to urge them to adopt Vision Zero, if that's the right terminology. Solicit whatever comments they have off the top of their head while they're sitting there up on the bench. And then we go from there. So then we have some feedback from council. We've initiated a discussion. We've educated council members a little bit.
I like that idea except for one thing. I do not want this too closely identified with me personally. I'd like to think that, you know, I've got other people on the commission. I especially want the council to know that there's other people on the commission that may like this idea.
But as chair, you represent us.
I get that. I'm looking for a little backup here.
I'll come if you want.
I like the rest of that idea, except, Council Rep. Bill, what do you think? Do you think that would be interesting?
I think so, yeah, and you know, we could potentially get this either as a, you know, public appearance for a non-agenda item, whether you're then
No,
limited to.
it would be
or
under
put it on
the
a cow or
Transportation Commission report.
something. Okay,
And so I would say, we're here for 5 minutes to tell you what we've been thinking about.
Yeah.
And get any feedback that you would like to give us individually. Does that seem like a good thing?
it does.
Okay. I will send to staff kind of a summary proposal about that to distribute to everybody and get some feedback from you. And then I'll work with Bill to get it on the council agenda.
And I'm happy to go with you as well.
Oh, is that
I was gonna ask if you wanted somebody else to be
That
the
would be
official
terrific.
face of it, but,
I do think it's a good idea to have a different face up there than yours. And Elizabeth would be a good one, since you have some knowledge of this Vision Zero. And since you just offered to work with Steve, I think it'd be a good idea.
1,000 Friends of Wisconsin took over a program called Active Wisconsin. And under Active Wisconsin, the city of Fitchburg and Bike Fitchburg and the Fitchburg Chamber got a resolution passed in 2018 to cooperate on active transportation, biking and walking. And we were recognized with that agreement as a Wisconsin Active Together community. So this is something I always pull out when it's time to get the council's cooperation on things like this and say, we want to move forward with this. Furthermore, 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin and Active Wisconsin have been working statewide to help communities have complete streets and Vision Zero ordinances. There is a national coalition to advance Vision Zero. Wisconsin DOT has adopted it, although they haven't gotten a very good implementation plan yet. So there is a lot of momentum behind the idea. Staff have any comments or suggestions?
One thing I just
warnings?
one thing I wanted to add is that the Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization is
Yes, good point.
implementing, or they are having a consultant do a high injury network analysis of the entire metro area. I think that is a big part of Vision Zero, kind of high cost component.
Yep.
That piggybacking off of that
Is
piece
that,
work.
is that part of their Vision Zero involvement, or is that?
The MPO has adopted Vision Zero, and as our transportation planning organization, to which the city is within their jurisdiction, they will support us and have supported us in these kinds of things. So that's one, they can do certain things. Every jurisdiction, as you guys well know, report all their road network changes to them, so that they do the mapping for the area. So it is, they're a huge advantage of having our MPO, being in our MPO area for this.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that as far as some of the small items that you were talking about that Vision Zero could help implement, we have the neighborhood traffic management process. That's kind of how we currently do those things.
Yep.
And there will be a committee of the whole presentation on that in September.
That management process, unless it's changed, the very first project was done in my neighborhood when I was an alder, is really kind of specific to residential neighborhoods.
Yep.
And so, for example, would not address this thing over here that I just talked about, the 30-mile speed limit. But that would be a key point to say, how could that program be expanded or adapted to better support Vision Zero?
So one thing I'm working on is updating that process.
One of the things that you have to be very careful about that is equity. Because people in our healthy neighborhoods, residents in our healthy neighborhood areas generally do not have the resources to pursue that process. And I had a person come to me at the event that we held, the mobile bike repair event we held at King James Way Park, asking for speed bumps around James, what's it called, King James Way or Circle or whatever that is. And because they're, the King James Way is subject to speeding and through traffic, and speed bumps have been built in the single-family areas, but not in the multifamily areas. And that is a killer. We are putting a lot of resources into where the residents are asking us for them, instead of where they might be needed most. And so keep that in mind as you revise. In fact, one of the things I would say is make the process less onerous. So that
is something.
if it's a healthy neighborhood area, staff should be able to pick up on a single resident's suggestion to move it forward. Okay.
Can I just, is that the September 27th meeting you're presenting this? The committee of the whole?
Yes, yeah.
Third Wednesday,
August 23rd.
fourth Wednesday.
Oh, sorry.
Is it August or September?
Yeah.
August,
one.
my
Oh.
fault. It was originally September and we switched it, that's my fault.
So next week, or the following, not next week, the following week, Wednesday.
Okay, well, that's a good discussion. I'm grateful for everybody's input. Does anybody have any other things that they want to say about this before we go on? All right, I think we're on track here. Final plat. Request by Dan D., agent for Hartung Brothers, to approve the final plat. So this is in Hartung Fields. Are people familiar with that? Blaney Road, south of Uptown.
Southeast corner of Lacey and Said.
Yep, people know what we're talking about, the railroad tracks runs through it. So, this is what we got sent, which is a final plat approval. And I said, you know, this is very uninteresting to me as a Transportation Commission member. It's really cut and dry because they already have their rezone from, so it's a planned development district, so the process is general implementation plan. They might have a comprehensive development plan, depending on the acreage, then a general implementation plan, then a specific implementation plan, and then they plat phases of it. And this is a plat of the first phase, which establishes the property lines. And that, what?
Could you just send it around?
Sure. Including the property lines for the roads. And so I said, well, this is way down the process from what we want. And so this was the master plan for this area. And the plat is for this yellow area here, which is multifamily housing over here. And what they did partway through is at the request of developers, they amended it to, this portion got changed to this. And I'll pass this around and look at both sides. But what they did was they eliminated this street. And this block of this street. And if you are kind of thinking about urban design, you can see what they did is they made the street on the west from an A street, which is walkable and designed to be a pleasant place to be, to a B street by moving all the apartment parking to that side of it. And they made the block twice as big and replaced public street with a parking aisle, private parking aisle with parking on both sides, which the public would not generally be permitted to go through unless you live there. So back at that phase, I would have complained about that as a Transportation Commission member because they're messing up the transportation system to make it easier for them to build the apartment buildings they want to build. But they're not, and they're not taking into account the things in here that say have a well-connected street network, have small blocks, have connections, have a grid, make streets pleasant for pedestrians and bicyclists as well as motorists. And so I think they're messing it up. But where they are right now, they already have approvals for the street layout and everything. So again, I'm thinking that this is not where we want to be commenting. We want to, it's a new development proposal, but it's way into the proposal, not at the formative stages where you get to define the transportation system. So,
How do we switch that?
well, I think it's an agenda item for next time,
Okay.
but I had a conversation with Deanna Schmidt, our planning director, and she had expressed to Dina when we were working on the agenda, well, what kind of development proposals do you want? So I called her up and I said, for starts,
Doesn't see it on it?
No, I let her, it's not there. It was just as you cross the track. And the guy's got the old schoolhouse, owns property south of Lacey Road there. And I was wondering, I don't see it on there. On that map.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Say that again?
The guy that's got the old schoolhouse, living in the old schoolhouse, just as you cross the tracks, well, south of Lacey Road, he owns property there. Up to the tongue, or whatever you wanna call it, Hard Tongue Brothers, and I don't see it marked off on there. Unless they bought it from him now or something, it's possible.
Okay, so I had a conversation with Deanna, and she sent me a list of everything that the Planning Commission looks at. Architectural design review, conditional use, land division, and then there's 5 steps: rezoning, telecommunications facility permit, minor comprehensive plan amendment, okay? within these types of applications, projects vary in use size and scope, and then she gave a partial list of all the different kinds of things. And so I said, my goal would be to have a written statement of what TTC wants to see after we all learn about these different things and their impact and timing and so on. At our September meeting. So do you have any suggestions on how to proceed? One possible starting point could be a list of all possible types of development review that the city does. Could such a thing be developed? And she sent me that. And then Bill separately commented, well, let's keep it simple. Why don't you just talk about it here and have Bill refer everything that we think is important to us. And I have not commented to Bill, but I will now. I think that we should not be depending on one person. An organizational development firm I worked in the 80s, one of the principals had a saying, one person does not a good system make. And in this case, I think it would foster understanding and eliminate the pressure on Bill, that if staff had a clear list, and it would be subject to change and so on, but I can see that that might feel like overkill. Then I got a comment from Chad, email from Chad Brecklin, city administrator. He says, I received your voicemail yesterday and discussed it with the mayor. While our ordinance indicates development plans will be referred to TTC, has been indicated by many others, including me, this hasn't been happening in the past. It's unclear what happens to the development class, what constitutes a development plan. Additionally, staff is unaware of what, if any, plans have ever been referred to TTC. And I agree that for the first 10 years, there were none. It may be helpful for TTC to suggest the development plans they would like to see. And finally, it would be appropriate for staff and the council to examine the overall development review process and timeline and determine if there's overlap or redundancy and so on. I think one of the arguments in the past was that the Plan Commission can also comment on transportation issues. That hasn't been happening very much.
I wonder why the Plan Commission is involved with this, because so far they're like this. And I also wonder about a lot of the stuff that Plan Commission does, because pretty much when you're dealing with an 800-page packet or a 400-page packet, you rely on staff for a lot of things.
And you'll get that packet the Friday before your Tuesday meeting, right?
Yeah, that's where my weekends go. Well,
Yeah.
used to go.
Conventional wisdom is that land use and transportation have to be planned together or
No, I
doesn't work.
100%.
Doesn't work.
I'm
And so
really
that's
happy-
why you're on our
I'm happy to
committee.
hear this, though.
That's why you're on our
I'm really happy to
committee.
hear this.
And both transportation and land use have to be considered, and so we're trying to get off the dime here. So anyway, with that kind of background, I do suggest that I would be open to any kind of, if someone wants to make, so this final plat is on our discussion items because it wasn't formally referred to us, okay? But Bill suggested, and I agreed, that it was coming before the council. Let's talk about it here. And again, I think this is a good example that final plat is too late in the process for Transportation Commission to effectively be involved. And that informs, I think, the discussion that we should have next month on what we want to see in terms of development projects.
So just this is not a question quick, but on this specific one, is this yet to go to council, this final plat?
I think it was referred out from council, but not to us.
So it's on its way to council.
It's on its way back to council.
Okay.
I don't have the, I don't think we have we didn't have anything in our packet for it. I had to go search for the Hartung project, and I came up with the final plat request and these two earlier things. that,
And I think back to what your question actually was, in support of my recommendation there, that if we implement a defined system of what gets referred here, there are risks of some things that should, still some things not coming here that should, or a lot of stuff coming here that really doesn't have to.
agreed.
As I mentioned at our last meeting, I'm a little wary of getting loaded down, so we have a 300-page thing to look at every month, but I personally would be very confident that Bill would do a good job of screening things out. And also I would say, we don't only have to look at things that are referred to. So I mean, there's no reason that we couldn't comment on this final plat. And all we do is comment anyway. So we could pick that up on our own volition, look at it and comment back to council on what we think about it.
Council Rep?
I'm all for that, yes. I think that's a great idea.
To leave it to you?
Well, as he says, regardless of whether something is referred to us,
Yeah,
TTC can put forth an opinion as it
indeed,
is supposed to do, right?
indeed. One of the problems, one of the reasons that the Board of Public Works meets every 2 weeks is because the council meets every 2 weeks. And so things can go to Board of Public Works and come back to the council right away. We only meet every month, and so if something is going to be referred to us, the council will not expect it back until the meeting following ours. If we just want to take a flyer at it, it could be back before the council for action before our next meeting. So that is a disadvantage of not getting something formally referred. But as I say, this is the way the conversation goes at the council. I'd like to refer this to transportation too. When will the transportation committee next meet? The transportation committee will meet following our next meeting. Well, that means that we can't decide this, then they'll ask the developer if that's okay. And if you haven't heard this yet, you will hear this many times during your stint at the council. And so there was, when I was mayor, a very strong reluctance to hold up any development plans. So they would issue referring it to committees that couldn't meet in time. That's why the bicycle committee, which meets every 2 months, never gets to see anything. So that's one worry about informal discussions and suggestions back to the council. So what do you want to do about this particular proposal? Do you want to make a recommendation to the council?
About
Parts of it.
final plat?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I think if we agree with you, and I'm inclined to agree with you, we should at least communicate that to the council, that we have concerns about this. And it's related to our other interests in having things referred to us. I personally have some sympathy with developers that want to get on with their lives and their business and get things done. I don't think it's a trivial concern.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
We don't want to be an obstacle, we don't want to be viewed as troublemakers. But if we have a concern about the way this is designed and it's a way of informing the council why we might want to be involved in development things.
Do you want to make a motion? You could move to recommend approval or disapproval and give some reasons.
Yes, I could.
Does
I just
anybody
don't know
want to do
enough
that?
about the whole thing. I mean, it looks like a nice bunch of streets and great picture, and I understand, I think, that you have some concerns about that street not being there, and that, I just don't know enough to say.
Okay,
But I do
well,
think-
let me try something and then you can say so moved if you like it. we recommend disapproval for the following reasons. Harvester Pass does not go through to Botanic Drive. And the parking along Botanic Drive degrades the quality of the street. We did not like the proposed change to the master plan that was approved on date, and wish we could have looked at that proposal at that time. And we recommend that you rethink this.
Yeah, are you making the motion?
I'm
Or is there a reason why-
proposing something.
Well, I'm confused. Was there a reason why you can't make the motion?
We have not made a rule about the chair making or not being able to make motions. I think I could make a motion, but I'm trying to be supportive of Bill.
I think you can. I just don't know. I mean, Steve, I think you're mostly right about stuff. This particular issue, I haven't given it any thought. I don't know if we should have put it through.
Well, I feel that nothing is going to change with this. It's too far along. They probably have architects doing the construction plans for all these buildings by now. Because this was approved, I don't know if this has a date on it, but
I think
Yeah,
that was
this-
May
this-
9th or something.
the original was July 6, 2022, and then it was March 13th, 2023 that they got this changed. So that was 5 months ago. So,
I would amend the motion to say we're not taking a position on the plat. It hasn't been referred to us, we don't have a position. We note that along the path to this thing, transportation changes were made, and that concerns have been raised within the Transportation Commission. And this is why we want to be able to have a voice in development projects.
second. So you'll be taking that as part of your Transportation Commission report at the next meeting when this comes up.
Yes.
Do you have that? Or,
Between my notes and,
The video, yes.
yeah, right.
all right, that's, any discussion on that motion? I think that's great, Bill.
Yeah.
I think it recognized the reality that this is down the road, but it puts the council on notice about the kinds of things we would like to see.
And then does this come up at your next plan commission meeting? And does it make sense for you to?
I can give the history of it if it does, but since that agenda will be out tomorrow morning.
Okay, yeah, I just don't know how.
Here is a gift.
My color printer is broken.
As a reminder of what we're talking about here.
You got a 20 on the back? Thanks. Just kidding. No, yeah, and I'll make an announcement later, fill it in more.
But I think to Bill's earlier point about reminding developers that at least these things exist, this is a good way to do it, right? To just keep sort of being the squeaky wheel at the council and also plan commission.
I think,
That's a great idea.
and I think we need to, as the transportation, we needs to have a better or more presence with planning and with council, because so much, and I think this is a fault of the city in general, is that so often commission members can be overwhelmed, and then we rely on staff reports.
Mhm.
And like, this is my staff report from the last planning commission. And this is none of the documents, but this is,
That's the Cliff Notes.
yeah, well,
That's
this is
just
just
them
a
weighing in
very,
on each item.
yeah, so, and I, like I said earlier, I do appreciate seeing the full document because I used to produce them. I like to see what's going on. Sometimes you stumble across something, sometimes not. But yes, I'll if that gets in there, I will address it. If not,
Yes. We'll just keep.
It'll come up.
Yeah.
All right, any other,
Talk about that with announcements, so.
any other discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay, that passes. Staff update.
I will take this one. So this will mainly focus on just some meetings that I attended throughout the past month. One of them was with the Madison Metro Transit Authority. On August 4th, they had a meeting of all of their municipal partners, everyone who buys transit service from Madison. Part of it focused on the network redesign, their kind of lessons learned from that. They'll be making route updates later this year and going forward into next year based on feedback that they've received from their riders. They discussed adding the city of Monona into their municipal partners. Monona used to be a partner, stopped buying service, and now might be interested in joining back in. So everyone at that meeting voiced strong approval
Support
for that.
Yes. That's a long-term goal, or a long-standing goal.
Then I've already talked about the partner service enhancements, that they might be opening up some additional capacity for more routes in partner cities. And that's what Tim and I have a meeting with them next week to talk about that. We also discussed formalizing an advisory board. One of the issues with the MTA in general is that it's a City of Madison department, and it's not a regional transit authority that's based on state politics. But one of MTA's goals is to push towards forming a regional transit authority in some capacity, whether it's the MTA transforms into that or they form a new organization, whatever it ends up being. But formalizing an advisory board is seen as a step towards that. So they'd have something to say, well, we already have this board, this can serve in additional capacity if we end up being able to create a regional transit authority. And that kind of moved into the long-term growth and funding discussion. One of the main reasons to form a regional transit authority is additional taxing authority that the MTA does not have. So with an eye on long-term growth, that's kind of what they envision unlocking some of the potential there. So there's also a discussion of other Tier B state-funded municipalities that may have an issue with how the MTA's municipal partners get state funding. We get a higher portion of state funding because we don't get any federal funding, because federal government doesn't see us as having a transit network. State government does see us as having a transit network, so we get zero federal money and a bunch of state money, and other municipalities get partial of each. So,
And we end up getting more.
it ends up working out the same if you add the two together, but the federal money knocks down the percentage of state funding that other municipalities get. So they're interested in lobbying the state to change how that funding formula works, which would reduce our state money that we get.
When you say you add them up, they get the same amount of, are we talking per capita or how does that work?
Yes, yeah, honestly, Justin with the MTA did not go into very much depth because it's pretty complicated on both sets of funding formulas, but it's percentage based, yeah. And then before that meeting, July 26th, I attended Greater Madison MPO Technical Coordinating Committee, where Tim was our representative there, and we've switched over to me being the representative there. The main thing we talked about at that meeting was, as I already said, the MPO high injury network and regional collision profiles. They talked about various crash profiles that were higher likelihood in their study that they've seen so far, went over some of those, and kind of gave an overview of what their high injury network study will look like once it's completed. We also talked about the STBG urban project scoring and proposed project funding.
Surface Transportation Board.
Yes.
So this is federal road money.
That the MPO distributes. So they had several proposals for funding various projects. One of the big ones was a path that Madison has been trying to complete for a while and will cost a lot of money. And
Cap City Trail to Glacial Drumlin.
yeah. And that was one of the main discussion points, was whether a lot of that money should be taken up on that path or whether it should be distributed out to smaller municipal partners like Windsor, DeForest, Sun Prairie. So we ended up not making a decision there and requesting that staff come back with different proposals for funding.
You should tell them that this is a missing link in a superhighway and it needs to be completed.
Where is it? I'm sorry,
This is, the Capital City Trail ends in East Madison, and then you're on rough, sketchy roads till you get out to, you have to take a county highway out and finally get to where the Cottage Grove, where the Glacial Drumlin starts. This is US Bike Route 30. It starts from the ferry from Michigan in Milwaukee and comes through the Hank Aaron and the Glacial Drumlin and other trails. Comes through Madison, goes down State Street, the Timmins Path, goes over the Merrimack Ferry up to 400 and the Elroy Sparta and the La Crosse River Trail, and finally goes into Minnesota. And that's the gap, and it's terrible.
How far is the gap? Would you say mile-wise, just a few or quite a bit?
It's a couple of miles. The real problematic one is where they just got TAP funding to go along the railroad tracks under the interstate.
So the outcome of that was there was strong support for keeping funding in for that and maybe knocking out a phase of John Nolan Drive from one of the funding buckets and having that be where some of the extra funding comes from. So, but that'll get voted on at the next
Policy board meeting.
Yep.
So for those who don't know, the MPO is divided into a policy board and a technical coordinating committee, and that's staffers. And the policy board are people who are appointed by political leaders to vote.
And that will come back to the technical committee before it goes to the policy board. The other meeting that we attended was a BRT kind of scoping meeting. We hashed out specific draft stop locations so they could apply for their federal grant funding. The main ones that were pretty easy to cite were Greenway Cross and Post Road on Fish Hatchery Road. Then High Ridge Trail was the next one going south. And then the BRT wanted to jog in on Cahill, Maine and have a stop near the Great Dane. there. It adds a little bit of complication to their route by not just going straight down Fish Hatchery, but it helps get the stop a lot closer to multifamily residential there.
People.
Yep. And then the final stop, and this would be their charging station and kind of a mini transfer point, is off of McKee, behind the Walgreens.
Okay, like,
There's like 3 Walgreens.
On,
Trevorton Pike?
yes, yeah, on the south side,
Okay, on the south side of the key.
yes.
So they go in something like Trevorton Pike and charge up because there's a creek side there and no development on one side of the road. Then you could come back onto Fish Hatchery or Brennan.
Not at Brennan, this would be, so they'd go south of McKee to, they'd go south of McKee to Brennan, then go north, and then come back out on McKee.
So do we have an opinion, or should we have an opinion about extending this out to City Hall?
We do. They're not asking us, but we can tell them.
I mean, maybe that's just something for the future to, when this is actually implemented or something, I don't know how much a plan at this level casts it in stone for.
That'd be a good thing for you to probe.
So this is for their federal grant funding. Anything that's in this plan, capital-wise, is funded 80% federally and 20% locally. So at this point, additional stops would cost the city of Fitchburg $200,000. If we wait and expand service later, they cost $1 million to the city of Fitchburg.
Do you have a motion?
Yes, I would just like us to do the right thing in a timely way. And so I'm not, what is the next step in this process, in this grant, federal?
They apply for the grant funding and the federal government gives them
When do they
their
apply?
score. Late August, early September.
This year?
Yes.
Coming right up.
A couple of weeks.
So what we would like them to do is have the charging station on Research Park Drive right here. And so they would bring their articulated bus down Fish Hatchery Road to Lacey, come back, stop here. This would be the timed charging stop. And then they would go down Research Park and so there would be only one left turn. It would be signalized. And we want that in the plan.
So you're saying if they amended the plan in that way, the implication for the city of Fitchburg is you have to come up with $200,000 somewhere down the road to make that actually happen.
Not to mention you'd have to pay for all the route hours of the buses running for the rest of your life.
So it's expensive.
Well, not as expensive as, for example, the idea of having a local city shuttle bus do the same thing. I mean, that's the path that Monona is just giving up, is that they had their Monona Express because they said, we can do this cheaper and we can do it the way we want. And they did that for many years and it cost them a bundle and the citizens were not really well served. And so now they're going back into the metro fold.
So the other option is expanded regular bus service
But you
from
don't,
that point.
yeah, but you don't put a short bus line on the end of a BRT line.
Right, this wouldn't just go back and forth to City Hall, it
Yeah.
would be a longer bus route, mostly east-west.
Yeah, so the Fitchburg flyer was proposed to come out of the south transfer point, loop around Super Target, come down McKee, loop around here, and then go up to the south transfer point. They say west transfer point. Anyway, that kind of service that would loop up around Hatchery Hill and then go back could fill that gap as well as regular bus service. But we want BRT. We've got development land, which is very important for BRT, right next to that charging spot there at the old, just north of Community Center and Police Department. So I'd like to see them put that in the grant proposal. How do we get that happen?
I believe for it to be a comment from the city, it has to come from council or the mayor.
Yeah, I think so, especially with so much dollars at stake.
Yeah,
And the city's already, in their budget, have budgeted for the 4 stops, not anything additional. So, in the CIP.
if you have a stop at Post Road and one at McKee and Fish Hatchery and another one at Cahill, Maine, that's pretty high density of stops. I would take out the High Ridge Trail, which would be well served by Cahill, Maine stop, and put this one in.
That would increase the driver hours.
Yeah, it still
It would
increases the
still be an
driver hours
additional
because you're
expense.
increasing the length of the line. I understand.
Well, I don't know, what about, instead of eliminating High Ridge Trail, eliminate the Cahill Main, which is, you know, that would keep them on Fish Hatchery Road, that would be more palatable to them. It would also help keep the R in BRT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the whole thing with this redesign was, do you want to have frequency, or do you want to serve a lot of neighborhoods? And they chose frequency. Now, to take the BRT and run it into a neighborhood runs contrary to even that decision that they made for regular buses. So, I like your idea better. Anyway, seems like another thing that we are getting asked about too late in the process. Or we weren't really asked about it, were we? We just blurted out. What else do you have to report?
That's all for the staff update. I guess, actually, one more thing. This committee is only scheduled for 10 meetings a year,
Yes.
and I believe you've met every month of the year so far, so.
June's was canceled, I don't know if that counts.
What?
June's was canceled, I
True.
don't know if that counts.
There you have it.
So,
All right, it's budget time. Please put us in for 12 next year.
The budget's already closed. So you guys,
Amendment?
I mean, you guys can amend it, but yeah, staff's already submitted it to finance to move through the process. We'll be sitting down next week with the mayor, finance.
Okay, so the mayor
director.
hasn't
No,
defined her budget.
it can be amended. What I said, staff has submitted their stuff. So
Right.
we
We can ask the
personally
mayor,
can't.
we can ask the mayor to fund us, and what's the charge? Do you guys work overtime, or do you take
No,
comp
it's
time?
just comes out of the normal.
Okay, it's part of your salary.
What the real
It would be
killer
the,
is
it would be
25
this,
bucks
yeah.
times.
Yeah. We have a bigger problem with the bicycle committee, it's only meeting 6 times, but I would like to meet monthly, and if you can make it happen, Bill,
Okay, I will,
ask Julian too. What's the impact, like $250 a meeting or something like that?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I do not know.
is the stipend 25 bucks a meeting or something like that?
Well, we have fact staff too. And
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Plus
That
the
has-
air conditioning costs. Can't wait to go outside.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else from staff? Let's make a quick comment, council report.
Okay, transportation related things, I had made 2 CIP amendments, they both passed, these are for traffic calming on High Ridge Trail and Pembroke and Osmondson. And, some of the residents on Osmondson have already begun the NTMP process, and I guess I will be working with Pembroke and High Ridge Trail to get those processes moving. Okay. The tree preservation ordinance passed, so that will likely affect streets.
See tree
trees,
preservation plans.
Construction manager has been chosen for the new police facility, which is gonna be put out here between Research Park, Lacey, and Fish Hatchery Road, so there will be some transportation implications there as well once that facility is constructed. At the council meeting on Tuesday, Kale Engineering received a couple of awards for their work on the North Fish Hatchery Road reconstruction.
Project of the year.
Best of state, engineering excellence awards. Couple of resolutions have come through. One to select MSA Professional Services to draft the South Stoner Prairie and Greenfield neighborhood plans. A resolution to expand the South Stoner Prairie future urban development area. Of course, we've got 3 new TIDs being created this year, an expansion, or I shouldn't say 3 new ones, but there's an expansion of TID 10, and then 2 new ones. That 10 is North Fish Hatchery Road, 16 is out in Southdale, and 17 is
Same time.
on Anton Drive.
I'm gonna mention those.
And then a couple resolutions we talked about at the Public Works meeting for road resurfacing. And so there's, evidently we didn't do it in 2022, so those funds roll over to 2023. So we got about 3 million for that, plus another $1 million in ARPA funds to do additional road resurfacing.
Was that the staff shortage issue in 2022?
Yes, I believe that's the reason the city forgoed that.
So the sum total is like 4.2 million in road resurfacing this year.
I saw the map.
There were, 39 streets, and I don't know how many parking lots there were?
1 parking lot,
Just
3
one?
basketball courts.
Yes. Okay, oh, okay, right.
Any paths?
No paths, but there's also the bus stop paths for the MTA redesign. Those are in there too.
They're concrete, right? They're done.
Yes.
I believe Dave is up.
You just said what we did.
All right.
Okay, no further report.
My turn.
Rich?
A lot of amendments to TIDs due to the town of Madison being attached to Fitchburg. So that, as Bill was saying, there was the Zimbrick property, that was TID 10. There was Southdale, which was TID 16. And there was the Verona Road, Anton, that's not really a town of Madison, but this is interesting because these businesses were depressed because they faced Verona Road, and then Verona Road was rebuilt, and so they're
underground?
Yeah, they're considerate, they need help, just leave it at that. There were some certified survey map requests and rezone requests for Apple Garden wanted to change their hours and increase rural events, which is not allowable in the AX zone. More certified survey maps and rezones, and a CUP for expansion of the arts education facility at Index Road, which was sunset October of 2022. And then several items were postponed. Another, as the town of Madison, was an architectural design review for a Zimbrick building that has no public customers. And that's in a nutshell.
Thank you. Any questions for our representatives? We have others. Any other reports that we can think of? On future agenda items so far, we have proposal to talk about development proposals for TTC review, and it seems logical that we talk about Vision Zero next time. Are there any other topics that we left dangling or will need attention, besides whatever council send us and whatever Bill thinks that we should see. And let me just say, as far as development proposals, if we get things that are inappropriate, that's okay, because we're feeling out.
We can dismiss what we.
We're feeling out what it is that we want to see, and so it's an educational process too.
So pretty much this is off the list now, you're gonna go through the council and get their feedback, and then we'll go from there. Is that what
Yep.
decided?
I'll try to get on a council meeting before our next meeting. Put together some things for the council packet, educational material. All right, I have no other
I
business
have
on
an
our agenda.
announcement.
Oh, I would be grateful for your announcement.
I just want to let you all know, due to a medical diagnosis I received last fall, I'm going to be resigning. I talked to the mayor briefly last meeting at planning commission. I'll continue that. So I may be here one more month. Apparently I might be the last meeting for the year. In which case it doesn't matter.
No,
No.
we only
I just
have to
want to let
skip
you all
one.
know first before I've actually done it. So, and I think, I love, I honestly, you guys are great. I love what I'm seeing here. I'm actually seeing progress and stuff being done and stuff we can sink our teeth into.
I'm sorry to see you go.
Well,
Thanks.
yes, we will miss you then.
Yeah, I don't want to disclose publicly why, but if anybody wants to join me for a beer, I can get drunk and I can tell you.
That might have something to do with the diagnosis. though.
No.
All right, the other announcement, the more mundane one, is that we will meet next on September 14th at 6:30 in this very place. Thank you all.
We need a formal motion to adjourn.
Oh, yes, let's have
I
a,
move we adjourn.
I second it.
any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. We are adjourned.
Tim?
Thank you,
So
Pat.
Tim,